Hello, everyone. Dr. Eric here. So I'm going to actually introduce myself first, and then I'm going to introduce my lovely guest here that is going to take and really take the floor for most of this, and then I'll intervene. But for everyone that doesn't know who I am Dr. Eric Kruszinski. I am a pediatric and family wellness chiropractor at Addio Chiropractic, where we are focusing on brain development and making sure that our foundation of how our bodies operate is working and functioning at its best at all times. So, and that's why I wanted to have my lovely guest on, because she does that same type of work in a different realm. And I think just the power and knowledge of both of us, and with the times that we're in, you parents need this information, and we are, just so thrilled to be able to provide you guys with information about strategies of getting through this time. Because one of the biggest things before introducing Erin is that going through this time is that we're going to have to learn from this time being adaptable. If we're not adaptable during this time, it's going to be rougher than it's going to be. And this is going to be one thing that we'll talk about tonight. Erin will talk about. But adaptable is just being able to change oneself to fit the occurring changes that are occurring in our environment, which, going into day one of school is going to look different potentially than day 5 and then day 10. So, really being adaptable is big. But let me have Erin introduce herself and talk about herself a little bit.
Well, hi, everybody. I'm so glad to be with you. My name is Erin Sadler. I'm from the company, I'm the founder of the company, The Rooted Family. And what we do is we do mindful self-awareness, brain awareness training through social emotional learning. So we help kids and adults and communities learn about their brains and how their brains work. And we tie that in. Dr. Eric's heard me say this before. Every thought or action that you do resonates into some kind of feeling within you. You have some kind of emotional reaction, and that emotion travels from your body up into your brain, into a place called your amygdala. So when we have social emotional control and we're able to do self-regulation, we're actually able to think a lot more clearly and use our brains more efficiently through using our prefrontal cortex. So when kids learn about how their brains work, as well as grown-ups, it helps them to empower them to know that they have the ability to change the neuroplasticity in their brain. And then we show them how through our brain boosters, which are the brain research ways to boost the neurotransmitters that are going on to create happiness and healthy and well-being all in your system. So that's kind of what I do, and it's so fun. And so stress is a big one we're talking about right now with everybody and everything that's going on. Kid stress, parent stress, teacher stress. That's what it's kind of the jam right now that we're talking about.
Everybody. So
yeah. And I'm a mom of 3 too. So I'm right in it with everybody as well. So I have a elementary school kid, a kid who's in middle school, and a high schooler. So I have, I'm doing 3 schools. Our district is virtually learning. So it's that whole aspect too. So from a mom's side, helping keep my kids mentally healthy and making sure that my family has well-being has been a major priority during this whole pandemic.
Yes. And, and just to kind of get, like you said, you were virtual, like this, is going to be geared towards anybody, meaning, if you're completely virtual, or if you're hybrid, or you're completely in person. All of these concepts and strategies that we're going to talk about is going to be able to be applied in any of those situations. So
100%. I mean, these are just good practices on any given day.
Yeah.
I guess they're just so much more relevant and so much more critical in this time period when we need mental awareness ourselves. We need to be taking care of ourselves. We need to stay sane for our families and our kids and not feel overwhelmed. And our kids need the same. So it's all about helping the entire family, along with teachers and everybody that our kids are going to be interacting with, help them learn to manage their stress a little bit better. And we can do that by sort of having the setup there. So if we set the system up to work for us, then we have a system that works. And then when the learning comes along, you're ready for it. And you don't have a struggle with the system and the learning. You might only have to just integrate the learning into what you're already doing.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I will say, I guinea pig this I've been coaching this summer and I have my own children, and we did not take a break from learning. We kept going because I wanted to test all these out in a COVID setting. These are things that I've always recommended to people when I've coached families and kids, but I wanted to see if they needed to be tweaked, or how does that look different when we're virtually learning. So I really did use my family as guinea pigs and test it out on them.
Yeah.
They have really been my guinea pigs since I started this whole journey. And then I take it out further than that. So they're very they humor me.
You got to start somewhere. You got to have a database to build up.
Yeah. I mean, you should start with your own family, and then if it doesn't work, know not to go on that whole thing. And I've had a lot of parents reach out to me and say, spring did not go well for their family, and it didn't go well for any of us. We all got thrown into it. The schools got thrown into it. But I think no matter whether you're hybrid or virtual, or if you're in school, helping your child and yourself not carry what happened in the spring over stress-wise, and being able to release some of that, and then start off on a more stable footing for you, because everybody was unstable and there was unknown. And our brains do not like the unknown because they like things to be a pattern. Our brains like patterns. We follow the same neurological pattern. That's why we usually eat our breakfast the same way every day. We sit at the same place at the dinner table. We like the pattern. We, drive the same way to work, even though there might be 50 ways to get to work, because our brains like the pattern. It goes into our default mode network. So when we don't know the pattern or the unknown comes, it automatically triggers that stress response, that fight or flight response. But we have to know that we have the power to control that response when it's not specific danger. If it's just perceived danger to us, we have to be able to name that and say, I'm actually not in a dangerous situation right here. I'm in an unknown or an uncomfortable, or I don't like this feeling inside of me.
Yeah. And I think to just build off of that is that concept of prediction. And, before COVID, we had more prediction of what our daily life was going to be and what that next day was going to look like, where now it's changing, all the time. And especially with our kids, where their brains are not that efficient at prediction yet. And it's more of a struggle for them, and just for everybody. But it's just one of those that, it's going to be a huge concept. And, we just want to provide you parents with value and, strategies and to get through this, because we'll get through it. And one other thing, other than the concept of being adaptable during this time, is that it takes team. It takes a village. Like, you're not the only one. It may feel at times that you're the only one in this, but we're in this together. That's why, again, wanted Erin, because, I think we are here to provide and support our community as much as possible, and, are always willing to just be here as a resource for our parents and for our community, and providing them with anything that they can need and have questions to.
Yeah. I 100% agree. And I've had a lot of parents say to me, either my child is very emotional about everything that's gone on, or I feel like my kid has closed up, sort of clammed up. And so to me, those are they're two in the same, in that the kid's having an emotional response. It just looks different. And so that's when you're talking about a village. When it comes to our kids' mental health and well-being and our own mental health and well-being, we have to reach out. We have to reach out and get those resources that we need to make sure, even just for a sense of peace of mind, so that you as the parent aren't wondering. And I say, just sort of when I talked about the brain in the beginning, especially for the kids that are closing up or you're not knowing how they're feeling, or a lot of times even pre-pandemic, I would have parents that I would coach that say, well, they just don't like talking about their feelings. And I would say, well, that very well may be true. There's a lot of kids that don't like to talk about their feelings, but that does not mean that they're not experiencing feelings.
Yeah.
And that they're not dealing with them some way. All those feelings are traveling to their brain and their brain's processing them. We need to know how it's processing them. So if they are having negative self-talk, or they're having a hard time with ruminating thoughts, or they're living in the stress, that we sort of get in there and see what that thought pattern is, so that we can help them to rewire or restructure if it's needed. Mm-hmm. Same thing with a kid who may be overly emotional. If they're having difficulty self-regulating, it can very much feel like you're jumping off a cliff without a parachute, because especially if you didn't have those, or if you as a parent notice yourself being very up and down with your emotions, it can feel very unsettling. So for me, I use mindfulness as a tool, and breathing as a tool, and meditation as a tool to help kids discover what that calm button is, so that they can tap into that calm button and be able to push it when they need it. Kind of like that easy button from Staples. Like, I want them to be able to have that, so it is easy for them to just turn that feeling that they're having and not feel overwhelmed by it. Mm-hmm. I want everybody to experience all the feels, but I want them to have the choice on when and how they feel the feels.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's an important thing. So I did, and Dr. Eric, you're so nice, because you went ahead and just checked them out, which I think is amazing. So besides kids' feelings, the second question I have is, how do I do virtual learning? So that's sort of what I put together for you guys tonight. And I was just going to give you my tips and tricks for setting this all up, and sort of getting that structure in place. Does that sound good?
That's awesome. No,
okay.
I think that's such a big value. And, I'm glad that you came out and got that all kind of prepared and ready before this even went live. So that's awesome.
Yeah, that's sort of what you were talking about with giving back. I really did feel like this was one of my superpowers, being a teacher and a brain health coach and a mom myself, and having the guinea pig kids at home to test this out on. I'm like, it was kind of the perfect scenario for me to be able to write this. So I'm so glad I can. And let me put the little caveat in there. I'm not, for the rest of this, I'm going to really be talking about structure to help you, and not as much about kid feelings as I just talked about. So if you need help with kid feelings, I know Dr. Eric has resources. I have free resources. I have the Rooted Family Circle. So if there's if your kid needs help with, let's say, developing gratitude, I have just a unit you can buy on gratitude that can help you guys get started. And it's a great supplement for if you are doing virtual learning. All right. So the first tip is your mental mindset. Mm-hmm. And to me, this is the first thing we got to tackle when we're talking about virtual learning, especially if it did not go well. And I say, is your Beyonce mega playlist ready? Because if it is not ready, go find yourself a playlist to pump yourself up every day, because some of my friends, and you know who you are, have already started learning. And I get pictures of people on the Rooted Family where they're laying on the floor, this is exhausting. They're in virtual learning day one. And they're that was a lot harder than I thought. So we got to have some mental prep. We got to rocky it up a little bit. We got to get ourselves in the mindset. And that does not mean we have to paint our faces and say everything's perfect and it's going to be great, and we're just going to put a couple posters up. It's about being real. But you also have to, for your child, come at it from a growth mindset perspective of, this may be hard, but I got you. We're going to get through this together. We're a team. I'm going to help coach you through this. And without, it's so easy to say like, oh, like this is going to be hard and difficult, and it's going to change our whole family structure. As much of that as you cannot put on your child is helpful, because they already have their own feelings about this. And if spring was hard for them, they already have their own anxieties about it. So making sure that you come to the table with them, leaving as much of your own baggage behind, and coming at it from very much like we are a family team. That does not mean if you do have some real anxiety and stress and worries, like Dr. Eric was saying, that you don't reach out to somebody else, but it might need to be the other co-parent or a friend or somebody else that you can express that to. But definitely going into it with a we can do this attitude.
Yes, I think the mindset aspect is huge, and it's a foundational component to just how we look at life in general. There's always two ways of looking at things. There's always going to be negative, and I think it was like 80% of the things that we think about is in the negative, just because it's everywhere. You go on social media, you go on, watch the news, it's everywhere thinking of the negative, but looking at it and flipping it in that, well, because of this, I get to do this. Like, always look at the other end of the way, and because there's always two ways of looking at things.
Yeah.
And mindset is just a big proponent that is kind of the foundation of just like how the brain and the nervous system are a foundation of how our bodies operate. The mindset is going to be the foundation of getting through this time.
Yes, so. I totally agree. And the really cool thing about our brains is they are really self-fulfilling prophecies. So if you're looking at the end game as a miserable experience, the brain will start working backwards, trying to get you to where you're looking towards. That's how our brains, they're puzzle solvers. So if the end game for your puzzle is this is going to be a disaster, then it will show you ways in which it's going to be a disaster. However, if you come at it and say, you know what, this might have a few bumps in the road, it's not all going to go smoothly, but I have the skills to help my child. I will figure it out. Whatever is in my way, I will figure out a solution and figure out a tool till. Then all of a sudden your brain's like, oh, she's going to get tools. She's going to have this under control. And it will start actually help building in those tools for you. So that to me alone, that's such a remarkable thing that our brain does for us. Yeah. And we have to utilize that skill. If we have the wiring there, let's use it to our advantage.
Yeah, exactly. That's that neuroplasticity that I talk about. It's, you could be, obviously kids' brains are always changing, but adult brains can change too. It's not that once you're adult, your brain doesn't change. You can change it. Is it going to be easy all the time? No. Right. That's just because the more that the brain's used to something, it just becomes ease. But to change it, it takes time. It takes frequency to build that. And that's something I discuss all the time with our families that come into the office, is it's going to take time. It's going to take, frequency to make that change. And that's going to be one of those that one day of trying to change mindset is not going to do it. But the more that we stick to it, the more we can get that mindset changed. So
I totally agree. My husband paid me a great compliment one day when he was talking to somebody. He said, you know what, Erin, a couple years ago, and he said she probably won't even remember that she said it to me, but we were just having a casual conversation one day, and I said, everything is always working out for us. And he's like, I had never thought. I said, look at how many things work out for us, and everything's always working out for us, which is not the true reality, but that's how I choose to look for the things that are working out for us instead of focus on the things that are not going right in our world. Because when you really look at your day, for the most part, there's a lot of stuff that's going right in your world. I turned the key in my car and it turned on without me having to do anything. That's a gift. And when I start seeing my little steps throughout the day as this is working out for me, I'm actually training my brain, which will then move towards things working out for me because I have that mindset. It doesn't hold me back.
Yeah.
All right. Enough about mindset. We'll move on. Okay. So the next thing.
Forever.
I know. We could just stick on the first one and probably talk about it the whole time. So the next thing is, it's so funny because it'll be a mixed bag of reviews on this, but I stand firm in getting yourself started in the back to school routine now. If you have not started school yet, your kids, if you throw in, you remember when it was regular school and maybe you let it slide till the very end, what a hardship was. You're not sending them anywhere now. If you're virtually learning, they're going to be with you. So that hard part is going to extend throughout your day. But if you start getting into a routine now, start getting into a schedule now, then that hard part is over when the learning comes. When that uncomfortable new learning situation happens, you have at least established the schedule to get you on the right path. And every kid's schedule is going to look a little different based on their virtual learning. So sort of getting a little program together now. My kids have not taken a break from learning, like I had said earlier. So they're doing a little bit of reading, a little bit of math, a little bit of writing, a little bit of science every day just to keep that training. It doesn't have to be as much as regular school, but setting aside the time, having their brains start to get used to that and doing that little bit. I will tell you, my children, because of virtual learning, their writing they just in spring did not practice writing like they would have like they were in school. And that's one of those skills that really can regress quickly. Mm-hmm. So making sure that they did do 20 minutes of writing every day to get that back and just get them in the pattern of doing it is going to help us so much when school starts. So it is never too late to start getting on a schedule. And if your child needs checklists to follow through on multi-step directions, now's the time to start doing checklists. If you say brush your teeth, brush your hair, make your bed, get dressed, and they can't do that without forgetting something or getting sidetracked, or then you need to go back to 3-step directions, but you have to start doing it because they're going to be expected to do that when they're sitting doing virtual learning, or they're going to be expected when they go back to school to follow multi-step directions. So if they haven't had that practice, now is a great time to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, routines are huge, and I think that builds on to something that we talked about just in the beginning was structure and prediction. Mm-hmm. Like start now, just so that it's not that we get first day one of school and it's like, okay, here we go. Like kids are gonna act out because you just changed their world in a very short period of time. So changing that routine now is gonna be huge, but it's gonna also allow them to predict what's going to come. But also, having that written down, I think he said, have it written down on a calendar, like this is what we're gonna do today, so that they can visualize it.
Yeah.
It's depending on what age that they're at and, developmentally on the trajectory of development, they may not be good at visual cognition or that mind's eye and predicting what's going to happen. So they need that prediction. They need it written out because it's then they can expect, they know what's going to come. So that's going to be huge. So if, especially with more, I would say my kiddos that are like hyperactive, maybe they have the ADHD diagnosis, like they need that prediction because they process their world more through movement, touch, and they're not very good at the cognition. Not that they can't get there, they're just not there yet. But it's gonna help them get through, but also help you as parents get through there. So
yeah, it really becomes, I think sometimes schedules are looked at as such a bummer, like, oh, it's still summertime, but it's a touchstone for your kid to go to that doesn't require you. So if you're trying to build autonomy in your child and build some independence, having something that they can go to other than you for what they're supposed to do next is super helpful. And if you're going to be trying to work, and do virtual learning with your kid, this is almost a critical point right here, that they have to be able to check a schedule, know what they're doing next, and sort of transition themselves. The whole first month of school when you're a teacher is about transitions, schedule, structure, and everybody knowing where their things are. Those are the 4 things that you are working on. And obviously social emotional, but organization wise, that's what you're working at. And they spend a whole month of school doing it. So if you were to come back from summer and be like, let's jump in for the first day of virtual learning, you're kind of setting yourself up for failure. You could really be so much more ahead of the game if you had this set up, at least in little bitty steps, to get you back and ready for school.
Yeah. And Michelle, to answer that, like, because she said, what about adding picture visuals for under the age of 9? They think in pictures still. Totally. Like, you may even have a kid a little bit older that just developmentally, they're just not there yet. And they may process their world more through pictures. So, it's really, you may have 2 7-year-olds and they're going to process their worlds completely different depending on where they're at on the trajectory of brain development. So yeah, like, finding what works for that kid and really utilizing that. Where some kids it's visual pictures, where some kids it's written things. It's really finding what works for that kid and utilizing that. That's going to help reduce the stress load on their brain and help to reduce the chances of their brain getting overwhelmed.
And I will say too, you have to do what works for your child, whether time increments work best or activity increments work best. We talk about chunking with grownups all the time. So some kids really like to get involved in an activity, and you don't want to break that learning time and say like, 15 minutes are up, you're done. So maybe breaking it into activities, like we're going to work on math for this amount of time, and then we're going to work on this, or you can do a time structure. But I will say even older kids too really benefit from a picture. It is helpful to them.
Yeah.
I mean, if you see these really cool teenage ones, schedules that they make now in these books, they're amazing. And they're using all visual and pictures in there when they're doing their journaling. It's pretty cool. Okay. Ready for the next one?
Yes.
Are we getting feedback?
I think so. Might be for me. I think it's better now.
Okay. I can't hear it on my end. Do you hear it on your end?
I did, but now I'm not hearing it anymore. So
Okay, good. All right, so the next one is setting expectations and following routines. And this, when I talk to parents, so they're going to go in all schedule and checklist, and we're ready to go, guns a-blazing, and we forgot to set expectations. And so often we set expectations, and they are what we want and what we expect, and we don't co-create them with our kids. So if we can learn to co-create with our kids, then they have bigger, better buy-in into the schedule and the checklist and the routines. So sitting down with your child before school starts and having a conversation about what their expectations are, getting really real about what your expectations are. When we sit down to learn every day, what are the expectations? What's that going to look like? Does that mean that you're sitting for the whole lesson? How are you going to check in with me? Really running through the day with your child and having how are we going to do snacks? What if you're hungry and it's 9 o'clock, but I need you to sit and do your lesson with your teacher? Are you going to be able to get up and go to the fridge during that time? So sort of just walking through the day and talking and setting those expectations about what they're expected to do in this new environment. Because like you were saying, they're not as predictive. So it does help them when you help them with that.
Yeah, so, I agree exactly. I don't even have anything to kind of add on to that. We do it together. It's not that you have that you have them set their own expectations. It's together. Like, what are those expectations?
Yeah. And some of the things that I said are great questions to ask are, what space would you like to work in? Not you have to work at the kitchen table. Where would you like to work? And see if you can come to some common ground, because if they have ownership of where they're learning, then they have greater ownership in the learning itself. Is this a conducive environment? Like, if they pick somewhere that's not going to be a good choice, having that conversation, like, why or why not is this a good choice? Mm-hmm. What do you need to help you learn? How are we going to keep track of the learning? Where's everything stored? What's our screen time expectation for the rest of the day? How much offline learning is expected? So just sort of having a conversation about that.
Yeah.
So, all right. My next one is how to help your kid become an independent virtual learner and not need you all the time. And this is a shout out to any of my teacher friends out there, because I will tell you, when this virtual learning is going on and your kid can ask you a question any minute they want to, that's amazing. It can be very stressful for you as the parent who's trying to get something else done and your kid has a million questions. But in the classroom setting, they're not going to be able to ask their teacher every little nuance of what they have going on. So developing some kind of autonomy system to help make them independent learners within the virtual system is so helpful. And I really promote like having a steno pad and having kids actually like sort of check in on the steno pad saying like, I want you to do this assignment. Any questions you have, write them down, and then check back with me when you've attempted everything. That doesn't mean they have to get it all right. It does not mean that it has to be done perfectly. But now that you and I have read the directions together, you've repeated them back to me, you understand what to do, you are expected to sit here and do whatever this assignment is. And then we will check in after that. Instead of, I got stuck on this little bitty piece. There's no growth mindset if every time they get stuck on a word or don't know how to sound something out, that they're using your brain to do it. They have to use their own brain, fail, make a mistake, and learn from that mistake to grow their brains.
Yeah, exactly. Just that last thing you said, that, I mean, that's how the brain, it learns from experiences. So yes, there's going to be failures, but you learn from those failures on what not to do or not, or, you know, what I should and what I shouldn't do. So yeah, like if they're constantly asking you questions all the time, they're not really utilizing their brain the way that they should. And that's just going to impact them long-term.
Yeah. And you're actually creating a fear of taking risk, a fear of learning, because you're not giving them permission to make mistakes and grow from them. You're saying, I will hold your hand this whole way. And then they're not developing the resiliency they need to, and they're in a safe environment. So if they make a mistake, you know, praise them on their effort. I really saw that you worked hard and that was really hard for you, but you didn't give up and you give it your best shot. And now you and I can sit down together and I'll help you work out how to maybe do that a little easier for you, or to help you learn a little bit more about how to do that. So just having that conversation too, praise for the effort, not that they got their work done fast or that was a breeze for them. I hear that a lot, like they got their work done so quickly. It's not a race. And if they are getting their work done so quickly, they probably need to get to the point where they are making some mistakes so that they can grow their brains.
Yeah.
Why that becomes the pattern for them, that I get it all right all the time. And then when I do make a mistake, it feels like a failure instead of a learning experience.
Yeah. And
So
I think that failure part gets, and I think you mentioned it, failure part gets back to that mindset of, you know, if they think failure is bad, then that messes with their mindset. And, you know, failure is going to happen and it's okay. You learn from it and it's build on that.
Yeah. I mean, I struggle with that. I have to remind myself of that on a regular basis.
Same here.
Yeah. That it's okay to make a mistake. And I'm learning from that mistake. I mean, I have to have the conversation with myself. Because when I was growing up, that I didn't always have that mindset built into me. It was strive, and do the best.
Yeah.
And everybody was wishing me the best of luck. Nobody probably would have done anything if I would have made a mistake, but I held myself to a standard of which then it was very stressful. One of the reasons I had to go into mindfulness, my whole 20s and 30s, I was running a race against myself. And it ended up really hurting me as far as physically, having physical stress catch up with me eventually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
I was the same. So
really,
that state of like trying to be perfect and try to make sure that, you know, I always look at it as failure. If I failed, it was a bad thing. It was, nobody wants to see anybody fail. You know, and it's like I said, it's still something that at times may battle. And it's just knowing that, hey, like, I'm going to learn from this. Like, it's okay for me to fail. And when you are okay with it as a parent, then your kids reflect that too and know that, hey, it's okay to fail. Like, it's okay that you got the answer wrong. Now we know, let's look at what you did and let's figure out how we can get that math problem, or figure out the math problem to get the answer correct.
Yeah.
And learn from that. So.
Yeah, so many kids I coach, their parents, because I'm a teacher, sometimes I do mindset coaching, and helping kids with social emotional coaching is my main thing. But if a kid's having a struggle, is your kid struggling academically in any area? And I can help support that while we're doing that social emotional. And so often when I meet with kids and they are struggling in an area of school, what they actually have is a mindset issue. They have put a mental block up, told themselves that they're not good at something because it's not coming as easily as they think it should, and therefore they've labeled themselves a failure. And just like we talked about your brain connecting the dots for you and showing you what you believe about yourself, if that's your belief system, especially we have a lot of it going on with math. They think they're not great in math, but it's really mental block. And then once you help kids take down that mental block wall, then all of a sudden they just open up, and then they're like, oh, I actually don't have a math problem. And I'm like, yeah, that's what we've been trying to tell you all the time. You don't have a problem with the math. It was that you kept blocking yourself from getting to that next step. And to see a kid realize that, be aware of it, and be able to self-correct that when it kicks in again, if it does, is beyond. I mean, it's the reason I do what I do. It is that kid has set themselves up for success for the rest of their life is amazing to me. I can cry about it every time if you ask me. I mean, I think of all those kiddos and it's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So my next one, another hot button issue, but I know it's been on so many people have reached out to me like, we're so concerned because our kids are on screen so much. And I am also concerned your kid is on screen so much. I'm concerned my own children are on screen so much. So I think we have to do some, especially if you're virtually learning right now. I think key takeaways are to take breaks often and to not be afraid to once you've done your virtual learning for the day, to shut everything down and not come back to it. And your child may struggle with that at first. But in our house, I'll just tell you how we do it. We do our virtual learning in the morning. Everything gets shut off for a long time. And then if everybody has done their chores and been respectful and responsible for the rest of the day, and, just generally being a helpful person, then we give them a little bit of time. That's the carrot at the end of the stick, that we might watch a show as a family, or we might have, if they want to play a game, then we might do that all together in the room. But that's just how it is right now. When you're on screens for that much, you can't be on screens anymore. Yeah. It's not good for your brain. And there really is no other way for me to say that, and that it is not great for kids' brains to be on screen so much.
No, it's I mean, to not, the brain nerd of me, like it just stimulates the brain so much, and stimulates the sympathetic response, which is our stress response. And, don't get me wrong, stress response is great short term, but constant stimulation and how the brain works is the longer that it is exposed to stimulation and stress, the nervous system wires that way. So it's one of those that it can have impact, and depending on, at what age and how much they have, it can impact on their behavior. It can impact on their learning. It impacts so many different layers, and is such a crucial piece. And, like you said, like we have to do some, especially if you're virtual, but really managing the amount of exposure, because I have some parents that come in and they know when their kid had too much technology, because they take it away and they flip, because it is an addiction. It stimulates parts of the brain that become addicted.
Yeah.
It's huge.
Yeah. For anybody that's not aware, there's neuroscientists working on your kids' games. they hire neuroscientists because they know how to hack your kid's brain. And I always, when I go give workshops about this, I always say, if I knocked on your door and I said, hey, can I borrow your kid's brain for the day? Your kid, I'm just going to take your kid and I'm going to wire their brain differently. I'm going to give them an addictive personality. I'm going to change how they manage their emotions. They're going to be angrier. They're going to be more combative. They're going to be more argumentative. And then I'm also on top of that going to way skyrocket their propensity to have a mental health issue, anxiety, or stress. Would you say, hang on, let me let my kid get his shoes and I'll send him out with you? No, you would shut the door in my face. But on a daily basis, we are opening that door for technology to do that to our kids' brains. And I think as parents in general, and I'm living with it, I have 3 kids, we have to be so careful about what we are letting manipulate our children's neurological wiring in their brains. And every time your kid is playing something that is a game or social media, they're getting a dopamine hit. And same thing happens when you send sugar to your brain or when you are taking an abusive substance, you are sending that hit. And it's why parents have such a hard time getting kids off of it, is because the kid wants a higher dopamine hit every time. And then you go in and you say, it's time to turn off the screens, but they haven't hit that high level yet. And so they're angry. Like an addict would be angry because you're telling them to turn it off. And their personalities begin to change, and then it becomes you versus them, and it's an argument. And I've seen it so many times in the people that I work with, that I'm very much like, I think we need to cold turkey it off for a while. And that is always super hard at the beginning, but I have never had a parent come back and say, that was a terrible mistake. They're so thankful that they're like, we just needed somebody to tell us to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And screens too is TV also. It's, it's, phone and laptops are going to be the most probably utilized, but TVs are right there. Blue light, they don't reflect as much, but I think cell phones are number one with blue light. And that goes back to Michelle's question. I don't know if you know about this, Erin. I'm not sure much about the.
You read them to me.
It's how do you feel about blue light blocking glasses? Do they work?
Now research has shown both sides of the spectrum, so I don't have a definitive answer. I know in my house, my daughter was suffering from, my oldest had headaches. So when she went to middle school, all of a sudden they were on their Chromebooks all day long. So she went from just sporadically being to all day long being on her Chromebook, and she started to have headaches. So we did get those, and they seem to help. So from personal experience, and then my husband also has a pair because right now he is constantly looking at a screen, and he also says it helps. So our personal experience is it has been helpful, but I don't think the science, unless you know, Dr. Eric, but I don't know that the science is.
I have not looked much into that. Now, like I have some blue light built into my glasses, but if that's just a psychological thing that makes me think that they're working, I think there's always that part. But I'm not sure yet on the science aspect, but so that's for me to look into.
Yeah, Michelle, just so you know too, you don't even have to do just glasses. Like they have whole screens that you can just get and put over your screen too. So there's a lot of different things you can order. So all I have is anecdotal evidence. I don't have definitive scientific data. What I've read seems to say that they are helpful. And I will say, if anybody has a kid looking at screens right before bed, roll that back, because that's really going to interfere with their ability to sleep in their sleep patterns. So, and the other one thing I wanted to say about screens, and this is more for the teenage set, but if your kiddo is sitting doing virtual learning and they have multiple screens, like they're looking at their Chromebook or their computer, they have their cell phone next to them, one screen at a time. Everything else gets moved away. Our brains can do two things. We can train our brain for focus or distractibility. We're always doing one or the other. And when you have multiple screens going at the same time and you're letting your kid look at their cell phone and they're trying to learn virtually, we're training our brains for distractibility. So our ability to focus is going to diminish. So if they have to be looking at a screen and they have to be virtually learning, that's all they should be doing at that moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you too. That goes for grown-ups too.
Yeah. I'm a victim of that today.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we all are, but I think we just need to be a little self-aware that in that moment we're not helping our cause with stress and focus. You know, when your stress goes up, your focus gets lower. And then when we add distractibility, we're just like subtracting points from ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Just making sure that we're aware of that.
Yeah.
And then I have mom guilt or parent guilt. I call it for myself mom guilt, but I mean anybody who is taking care of a kid for the day. I think there's a lot of things are not how they normally are for our kids. And we have fear in ourselves about what this is doing to our kids, this pandemic, and how we're doing it. But coming from a place of fear and guilt is not going to teach our kids the skills they need. So being really self-aware about what you feel, especially if you're a working parent like I am, and you have to get your work done during the day, and things are you're maybe not going to be able to sit down for every minute next to your child. First of all, no, that's okay. And second of all, if you have some guilt about that, then being self-aware of how you want to deal with that so that you don't have guilt and shame, because guilt and shame are not a good way to parent. We want to parent out of love and not parent out of fear. Because if we parent out of fear, then we teach our kids to use fear as their catalyst going forward too, which is really self-destructive.
You nailed that right on the head.
I try. And then my last one are just always like the little wrap-ups that you got to think about, like bedtime and sleeping. If you have not gotten back into a bedtime routine or you're never wearing a bedtime routine, sleep is going to be so important for helping maintain your child's mood. And remember, they're going to be with you all day if they're doing virtual learning. So you really want them to be in that tip-top mood form and get everything lined up for them as nicely as can be. So especially if we have tweens and teenagers, they tend statistically to be the worst with getting enough sleep. So really putting some, getting those expectations and that structure in place where screens are away at this time, we go to bed at this time, and we wake up at that time, getting that consistent sleep cycle so that they can regulate their internal workings so that they can benefit them and be a boost for them. Anything we can do at this point to boost our immune systems is only going to help us. Yeah. I mean, we really need to be focusing on and that's doing something we can control. There's a lot of stuff we can't control right now. One thing we can control is boosting our immune systems and making sure that we're keeping them where they need to be. And sleep's a major part of that.
Yeah. And I'll talk about that even more tomorrow night on the health and wellness aspect of just, things that we can do to make sure that our brain and nervous system are functioning at their best, that our immune system, what can we do to help boost our immune system? And sleep is a big part of that, for both of them. And I think that'll be something I'll even dig deeper into tomorrow night. So join me tomorrow night on that to find out more things that we can do from a health and wellness aspect.
That's awesome. Yeah, I will be tuning in tomorrow to find out how I can even tweak it even better.
Because I think even just getting back to the, just build onto that immune system aspect quick, screens impacting and stressing the brain and the nervous system and stress and getting more of that sympathetic response, our stress response, our immune system doesn't live in our stress response. When we're getting chased by a bear, the last thing that we're worried about is fighting off a virus or a bacteria. So we want to do things that are going to put our body in optimal conditions and help to stimulate our parasympathetic, our rest and digest, our immune function. So like I said, I'll talk more about that tomorrow, but yeah.
I love that's my jam right there. I love hearing even more that I already know about that, but like the gut and the vagus nerve, like I preach the vagus nerve because I love that. If you don't know about the vagus nerve, that thing is rocking your whole body system right now. I mean, it's just amazing. So when I go into schools or I coach kids, I teach them all about their vagus nerve and how much it's how much they can help their vagus nerve.
Yeah. That's something we talk about all the time in the office.
That's awesome. That's amazing. So I think the last thing I want to touch on is, because for some of you who I just said we have to take all the screens away, might be having a little internal, like, I know I have to do that, but how? And I think one of the key ways to do that is to let kids be creative. But if they're not able to do that creative play themselves, or have a hard time transitioning, when you come out of virtual learning, sometimes it's hard time to, sometimes kids want to break free and they're like, free at last. And then sometimes they're kind of sluggish because they have been looking at a screen the whole time. So how do you move them and transition them to the next step? And I think one of the key things, especially if you're a working parent, is to keep a list of boredom busters. So when kids are going to come to you 10 minutes after virtual learning because their brain hasn't clicked over to doing something new yet, they're going to say, I'm bored. Mm-hmm. But what is happening is in their body, they're getting, boredom is uncomfortable. So it's uncomfortable for all of us because that's how we have, living in this modern society of stimulation and conveniences, we've conditioned our bodies that when there is nothing to do, or we have a moment where we don't know what to do, that we feel uncomfortable. And children, just like adults, don't like that uncomfortable feeling, and it's turning a stress signal on for them saying something's not right, something's not right. And for some kids, it really can produce a stress panic type of response. So first of all, just acknowledging that it's okay to feel that way. And really, if they sit with it for just a moment, what happens is, and it's so cool, your creative brain kicks on. So all of your parts of your brain that work with creativity, they will click on and they'll start giving you what maybe you could do, or some ideas, or they'll start clicking things together for you. But so often when kids just grab a screen, when they feel that uncomfortable feeling, number one, they haven't dealt with the emotion. They just pushed it down and got something to fill that space. And number two, they haven't had the opportunity to let their creative brain take over, so they don't know it exists. Right. If you give your kid the opportunity to be bored, and they enough times of them being bored, and then the creative brain kicks on, bored, creative brain kicks on, bored, creative brain kicks on. By the next time they're bored, their brain knows that the creative will kick on and that uncomfortable feeling goes down. So then every time they repeat that and they have that same self-fulfilling of, oh, the creative brain is going to kick on in a minute, they lessen their amount of stress response right there. So it's a huge service to your kid if you let them be bored and you don't try and solve that for them.
Yeah.
Now, that being said, you also don't want them whining at your feet. I'm very practical in that I understand that it can dissolve into tears and whining about you not helping them. So I always say make a list when it's a calm time of boredom busters, things that you will allow your child to do so they know that it's okay for them to do them, and things that they might want to try or do. And if you are busy or they need to fill that boredom space and you are not there to be their solver of that problem, and they really can't think of anything, they can go to the list that they have co-created with you and choose one of the things off the list. You can also make a big Tupperware bin full of things that they can only pull out in moments where they're having a hard time jump-starting that creativity. And that way it's sort of like a special bin that they can go to when they need to do that brain boosting. So, you know, as much open-ended stuff as possible, some wood, some art supplies, you know, things that they can create things into. It's amazing what a refrigerator box will entertain children with for a long time.
And depending on age too, like, you know, technology hasn't been around our whole lives. So like, what did we do when we were kids? Like, you know, one thing I always tell parents, you know, when they ask like, well, like what all contributes to this? Well, life is different for our kids. They have a whole lot more stresses. Like, you know, when we were kids, it was hard to get us inside. Now it's hard to get our kids outside.
Yeah.
So like, what did we do when we were kids? Like, you know, reliving some of that. You know, I'll see like companies are, you know, they're taking that idea because they're coming out with, you know, games that we used to play when we were kids, and they're coming up with those again because now all those kids that played those are now parents, and now they want those. So like being creative and thinking of like, well, what did I do when I was a kid? Like, get your kid involved with that, because if you liked it, maybe you can have that bonding moment with them too.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think, it's so funny. We were visiting, we had my nephew come, and he's younger than my kid. So he's 5. And he had a moment where he went to turn to me and say he was bored. And my kids were all like, don't say it. Because in our house, if you ever say you're bored, which nobody does anymore. So this is my parent hack trick. If you're bored, you get a chore. Like if you come to me and you say the word, I am bored, that means you're asking me to come up with something creative for you to do. And if you don't want to use your own creativity, I have a bajillion ideas of things you can do, but they're typically not things you want to do. So I always say, let me get my creative mom brain thinking about something that needs to be done around here. And then I'm like, board chore. I totally thought of it. And I'm telling you, it probably took maybe 3 times for 3 children to figure out that they do not want a board chore. Yeah. So when my nephew said that, they were like, don't say it. We're all going to have to do a chore. And they all scattered, and they all very quickly found something for him to do and started playing with him. And they were all in creative play together within 3 minutes. Nobody complained. Nobody said I'm bored anymore. They all had a lovely time. So if I'm the man and they have to work against the man together so that they don't get a board chore, I'm totally fine with that. It worked out great for all of us.
That's good.
Yeah.
And I think, just the big part of that is just like do something that gets our kids moving. Because movement is life. We have 2 feet for a reason. And it's not just that we have 2 feet. It's when we're on our feet, like developmentally, that's developing more of our cortex. So of our brain. So it's actually going to help them. That's why sitting, desk working sedentary lifestyle is so detrimental to our health. So let's utilize movement and what we know about movement to help our kids, with their development.
Yeah. One of the really fun ones that we've discovered is when our kids, and it's a teamwork thing too. So one of the things they love to do to get outside and to get moving is we tell them to construct terribly hard obstacle courses. My husband and I will say, we're obstacle course wizards. We have not yet to meet an obstacle course we can't conquer. So if you can beat us in one, then you are the champion of obstacle course making. So they usually go, and when they first started this activity, they would go outside and make they'd do 5 minutes of an obstacle course. And then they're like, we're done. I was like, all right. And then we come out and do it. And we're like, oh, sad little obstacle course. And through this, so the creativity they have come up with, because they're trying to get us into being the obstacle course champions, they now spend a good 30 to 45 minutes. And these obstacle courses I'm going to lose really soon because they are becoming extremely hard, but they're fun and we're all having fun together. And for 45 minutes, they're outside all playing together and using their creativity. And it's amazing to see. So just simple things like that. They're outside having a good time. I get to do whatever I need to do. And then we're sort of all being active together. So it's just, using that creative brain to me just makes our family become more connected too.
Yeah. Love it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Feel free to steal any of those ideas. Any that help you.
Yeah. That's good. I think that's that creativity, like utilizing the movement and creativity as one.
Yeah. And building some of that connectivity with your family.
Yes, exactly. So
those are my tips.
Awesome. Well, I think is going to benefit, all of the parents that are watching this. Some may utilize some more than others, but I think it's just beneficial to kind of have these things to set aside that we can utilize and help to get through this time. So thank you for sharing those 8 tips and, just taking this time also to really provide this information. And, again, thank you for joining me. Anything that you want to address before we end for tonight?
Well, I just wanted to say that if you, I should have said it at the beginning and I apologize. If you were furiously taking notes, they're all written in my blog. So, and there's more that I didn't even touch on. So if you go to therootedfamily.com and click on the blog, you'll see each of those outlined for you. And then the other thing I did for families was I put in, so if you get to one of the tips and you're like, whoa, like we need help with that and I need to know how to do that, I put the Rooted Family resource that would help you with that underneath. So it's right there in that blog. So you can just click on it and say like, yep, my kid or my family, or I don't know how, I see where you're going with that, but I don't know how to get myself from A to B. It's all right there for you. So you can just click and get what you need to help you get you on your way. I really wanted to make it as helpful and as supportive as possible. Because like you were saying, Dr. Eric, this is a village experience. And when I wrote these tips, it really was with that mentality of give people the most amount so they can be successful as they head into fall.
Yes. Oh, thank you for doing that. And yeah, I checked out the blog post and definitely checked out some of those links within the blog post. So definitely worthwhile for everyone to go check that out. So again, head over to just therootedfamily.com. You said it was?
Yeah, rootedfamily.com.
Yeah. So go over there, check that out. But she's got plenty of other resources there too. The Rooted Circle, all those things just to provide value for our community. So again, thanks for joining me. And then this was only night one of the Back to School Summit. So tomorrow night will be the second night and the last night. And it'll be me talking about the health and wellness aspect and really preparing our kids and their bodies to be able to adapt to this stress and what we can do to help our kids' immune systems, their brains, and their nervous systems be at their best. So join me tomorrow night, same time, 8 o'clock, right here on the ADIO Chiropractic Facebook page. And then again, thank you, Erin. And
thank you.
We'll have to join together again soon and talk about this. So
yeah, I'm sure. Thank you so much. It's my honor to be here. So thank you.
Well, everyone have a great night and thanks again for joining us. Bye.
Bye, everybody.